our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
On the 9th day of Israeli genocide aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, the death toll has surged to 2,384 victims, the majority of them civilians, including children and women. Israeli warplanes carried out a series of airstrikes today on various areas across the Gaza Strip. This resulted in a significant number of casualties, with the majority being children and women. And the World Health Organization, WHO, has pleaded for immediate reversal of the Gaza evacuation order to protect people's health and reduce sufferings. And in Algeria, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is chairing today a meeting of the Council of Ministers to examine the draft finance law for the 2024 financial year, as well as presentations relating to several sectors. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, on the 9th day of the Israeli genocidal aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, the death toll has surged to 2,384 victims. The majority of them are innocent civilians, including children and women. 10,020 or 250 others were injured. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said in a brief statement that the number of deaths in the Gaza Strip has reached 2,329, while the death toll in the West Bank also surged to 55, and over 700 people have been injured, 250 of whom have been hospitalized. The ongoing Israeli offensive has brought immense suffering to the civilian Palestinian population, especially in the Gaza Strip, with casualties, particularly among innocent children and healthcare workers, mounting around the clock. Israeli warplanes carried out a series of airstrikes today on various areas across the Gaza Strip, resulting in a significant number of casualties, with the majority being children and women. The situation continues to deteriorate, exacerbating the already dire humanitarian crisis in the region. Wafa correspondent said that at least 8 Palestinians, including children and women, were killed and several others were injured in a horrific massacre which targeted the Dardouna family home in the Jabalia refugee camp. The Israeli military also launched airstrikes on a residential building near the Al Fayruz Towers in the area of Al Mashtal, west of Gaza City. The airstrikes resulted in additional civilian casualties, including children. Ambulances rushed to the scene to transport the wounded to the Al Shifa hospital in the western part of the city. Mikhimar Abu Saada, a political analyst and professor at Al-Azhar University in Gaza, joined us from Gaza to give an overview of the situation in the Gaza Strip.
Well, the situation in Gaza is getting from bad to extremely worse. Today is day number 9 since the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Up until today, around 3,000 Palestinians have been killed, around 8,000 people have been injured. For the past 9 days, Gaza has been cut off from electricity, potable water, and fuel. Food and medicine is running out here in Gaza. And the most disastrous thing that happened to us here in Gaza, that over the past 3 days, the Israeli army ordered the Palestinians who live in the north of Gaza, Gaza City, to evacuate to the south. We are talking about more than 1 million Palestinians who were ordered by the Israeli army to evacuate to the south of Gaza, which cannot absorb that number of Palestinians. UNRWA schools have been with full capacity. I have seen people sleeping in the streets because they have no place to go. There are so many dead bodies and wounded bodies under rubble that the civil defense cannot even rescue them or help them. It's a disastrous situation I have never seen in my life.
You were listening to Mikhimar Abu Saada, a political analyst and professor at Al-Azhar University, joining us live. Meanwhile, Israeli artillery fire targeted residential apartments in the Turkish Tika Towers area located in the eastern part of the Khan Yunis district in the southern Gaza Strip. At least 3 Palestinians were killed and others were injured. The Israeli military's artillery barrage continued as it heavily pounded the eastern parts of Khan Yunis and Rafah, causing significant damage to the homes of local residents. UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini has said that across the Gaza Strip, more than 2 million people are at risk as water runs out. He said it has become a matter of life and death. It is a must. Fuel needs to be delivered now into Gaza to make water available for 2 million people. No humanitarian supplies have been allowed into Gaza for a week now. Clean water is running out in the Gaza Strip after its water plant and public water network stopped working. People are now forced to use dirty water from wells, increasing risk of waterborne diseases. Gaza has also been under an electricity blackout since 11 October, impacting the water supply. Only in the past 12 hours, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced. The exodus continues as people move to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Nearly 1 million people have been displaced in 1 week alone. Lazzarini added that fuel should be trucked into Gaza now. Fuel is the only way for people to have safe drinking water. If not, people will start dying of severe dehydration, among them young children, the elderly and women. Water is now the last remaining lifeline. He called for the siege on humanitarian assistance to be lifted immediately. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has highlighted in a phone call with U.S. President Joe Biden that peace and security in the region will only be achieved through the implementation of this two-state solution based on international legitimacy resolutions. Asia Bakar has more.
In order to achieve this goal, Palestinian President stressed the need to stop all attacks and respect international humanitarian law regarding what is going on in the Gaza Strip. During the phone call with U.S. President Abbas stressed the necessity of allowing urgent humanitarian corridors to be opened in the Gaza Strip, providing basic materials and medical supplies, delivering water, electricity and fuel to the citizens there. He categorically rejected the eviction of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, President Abbas demanded an immediate end to Israeli settlers' attacks against the Palestinian people in Palestinian cities, villages and refugee camps in the West Bank, and an end to the extremist incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque, which are causing an escalation of the situation. He reiterated his rejection of violence, affirming his adherence to international legitimacy, peaceful popular resistance and political action as a path of achieving Palestine's national goals of freedom and independence. He stressed the readiness of the Palestinian side to engage in achieving just and comprehensive peace in the region as soon as possible, stressing that security and peace will only be achieved by giving the Palestinian people their full legitimate rights. The president underscored the importance of creating a political solution and implementing the two-state solution based on international legitimacy, freedom and independence for Palestinian people in their independent state, with East Jerusalem as its capital on the 1967 borders.
WHO, or the World Health Organization, has pleaded for immediate reversal of the Gaza evacuation order to protect people's health and reduce suffering. WHO President Tedros Ghebreyesus also urged Israel to reverse its demand for the evacuation of Al-Auda hospital in the Gaza Strip, saying moving patients would put their lives at immediate risk. He said due to ongoing airstrikes and closed borders, civilians have no safe place to go, calling for the urgent establishment of a humanitarian corridor for safe aid delivery. In early remarks, Tariq Jorasvich, a WHO spokesperson, told the UN press briefing in Geneva that WHO has joined the wider UN in appealing to Israel to immediately rescind orders for the evacuation of 1.1 million people living north of Gaza and an end to hostilities and violence in the Gaza Strip, where unimaginable human sufferings are unfolding. Amnesty International has warned the Israeli occupation army's order to people in northern Gaza and Gaza City to evacuate to the south of the Gaza Strip amounts to forced displacement of the civilian population, a violation of international humanitarian law. Asia Bakar reports again.
Amnesty said regardless of the time frame given to the people in Gaza to move south, Israel cannot treat northern Gaza as an open fire zone based on having issued this order. Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Callamard said with this order, Israeli forces are setting in motion the mass force displacement of more than 1.1 million people from Gaza City and the entire northern part of the Gaza Strip. He stressed it has sowed panic among the population and left thousands of internally displaced Palestinians now sleeping on the streets, not knowing where to flee to or where they can find safety amid a relentless bombing campaign by Israel and merciless collective punishment measures. This order must be rescinded immediately. He added that Israel's allies and donor states must urgently call for international humanitarian law to be respected and civilians to be protected. Civilians in Gaza must not be used as political pawns and their lives cannot be devalued. The Amnesty International official urged the international community to refrain from further legitimizing Israel's 16-year-long illegal blockade and immediately halt the transfer of arms that could be used to commit unlawful attacks.
And the Israeli occupation authorities issued a threat today to the Kuwaiti hospital in the center of Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip, demanding its evacuation under threat of bombardment. Wafa correspondent said hospital administrations have refused to obey Israeli evacuation orders of the hospital, currently housing a large number of wounded individuals, including those in critical condition and requiring artificial respiration. Should the hospital be evacuated, these patients would face an imminent risk of death, adding that the Kuwaiti hospital's medical and administrative personnel have decided not to obey the unfair Israeli evacuation order. It's worth noting that Israeli war machinery has been continuously issuing threats to several hospitals directors in Gaza over the past 2 days, conveying these threats via SMS messages and phone calls. The hospital directors, however, have rejected the Israeli threats. The Arab League and Turkey have stressed the necessity to immediately stop the aggression on Gaza and provide the necessary aid to the civilians in the besieged enclave, including the creation of humanitarian corridors to funnel humanitarian aid to the inhabitants whose sufferings are getting worse and worse every day. This came in a meeting between the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghaith, and Turkey's Foreign Minister, Hakan Fidan, during which Abul Ghaith underlined that the dangerous escalation in the situation is logical in light of the political blockade and the absence of any hope for independence and normal life for the Palestinians, in addition to the systematic hindering of the two-state solution. And Israel carried out strikes northern or the southern region of Lebanon today. Earlier, at least one journalist was killed and 6 wounded in shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon. The Reuters news agency confirmed on Friday that Issam Abdallah, a video photographer, was killed in the attack. Israeli strikes targeted the airport of Syria's government-held city of Aleppo, injuring 5 people on Saturday, days after a similar strike hit Aleppo and Damascus airports. Syria's defense ministry also confirmed the strikes after midnight on Sunday, saying the airport has been rendered temporarily out of service. Thousands of Moroccan citizens took to the streets in massive demonstrations to express their unwavering support for the Palestinian people and cause, and calling for the cancelling of normalization relations between Morocco and Israel and kicking out Zionists from the Moroccan kingdom. The demonstrators were resolute in their rejection of normalization with the Zionist entity, voicing their strong opposition to normalization and expressing solidarity with Al-Aqsa flood operation. Demonstrations said the Palestinians are facing genocide, voicing their right to resistance to defend their lands and establish their state with Al-Quds as its capital. Morocco's massive demonstrations against normalizations and in support of Palestine underscore the depth of emotions and concerns among its citizens. And now in Algeria, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is chairing today a meeting of the Council of Ministers to examine the draft finance law for the 2024 financial year, as well as presentations relating to several sectors. According to a press release from the Presidency of the Republic, the presentations are related to the sectors of interior, higher education, agriculture, post and telecommunications, as well as public works. Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdulrahman has announced the installation of a special team at the level of the Office of the Prime Minister in charge of monitoring all interventions of the members of the National People's Assembly on the declaration of the government's general policy for the purpose of applying the Assembly's proposals, while answering the questions and concerns of deputies during the debate of the government's general policy. Mr. bin Abdulrahman announced his decision to install a special team at the level of the Office of the Prime Minister in charge of monitoring all interventions of the members of the National People's Assembly. The Prime Minister hailed the interest shown by the deputies to the declaration of the government's general policy, and they were charged with inquiring about its smallest details. And now the National Institute of Diplomatic and International Relations and the Romanian Agency for Development are organizing here in Algeria an international training session under the theme Post-Conflict Stabilization and Reconstruction Support to the Sahel. The course is made up of 5 training sessions dedicated to African countries and which were developed by the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the fields of combating disinformation, measurement of emergency situations, diplomacy, food safety, psychosanitary norms and regulations. This year's edition of the course, hosted by Algeria, is the third one to be held in Africa, as pointed out by Daniela Gitman, Secretary of State at the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
This year's edition of this course is the third one held on the African soil, and it represents a valuable addition to our multidimensional and fruitful partnership with Algeria. We firmly believe in the paramount importance of cooperating with regional partners and actors, as they have the best knowledge regarding the necessary expertise to address the root causes of the challenges they might face.
Ms. Gitman held Algeria's role in promoting stability in Africa and notably in the Sahel region, adding that Algeria is the most important partner of Romania in Africa.
Algeria stood up as one of the Romanian most important partners in Africa, as a promoter of stability, notably in the Sahel region. I take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Communities Abroad of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria and the Algerian Institute of Diplomatic and International Relations for their cooperation in preparing and hosting this year's course here in the vibrant city of Algiers.
And it's worth recalling that this training session is organized jointly by the National Institute of Diplomatic and International Relations, affiliated with the National Ministry or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, in conjunction with the Romanian Agency for Development. And finally, in Afghanistan, at least 7 people have been killed and 15 others wounded in a suicide attack. A suicide bomber blew himself up among worshippers attending prayers at a mosque in northern Afghanistan. Security officials were working to determine how the attacker reached the area to strike at the Imam Zaman Mosque. Hours later, the Daesh terrorist group issued a statement claiming responsibility for the attack. And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. Time now for a weekly or special program, devoted to the situation in Palestine with political analyst Mkhaimar Abu Saada, who is also professor at the Al-Azhar University in Gaza. So with this, we come to the end of it. We'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin in English. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now. So, Mr. Mkhaimar, the situation is getting worse and worse every day in Gaza and in the occupied territories. So, could you put us in the picture and tell us what is going on exactly?
Well, the situation in Gaza is getting from bad to extremely worse. Today is day number 9 since the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Up until today, around 3,000 Palestinians have been killed, around 8,000 people have been injured. For the past 9 days, Gaza has been cut off from electricity, potable water, and fuel. Food and medicine is running out here in Gaza. And the most disastrous thing that happened to us here in Gaza, that over the past 3 days, the Israeli army ordered the Palestinians who live in the north of Gaza and Gaza City to evacuate to the south. We are talking about more than 1 million Palestinians who were ordered by the Israeli army to evacuate to the south of Gaza, which cannot absorb that number of Palestinians. UNRWA schools have been with full capacity. I have seen people sleeping in the streets because they have no place to go. There are so many dead bodies and wounded bodies under rubble that the civil defense cannot even rescue them or help them. It's a disastrous situation I have never seen in my life.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented situation in the occupied territories, unfortunately, in the face of the international community standing still, idle, in front of all these exactions and aggressions about or against defenseless Palestinian people. So how could the international community play its role and bring the Zionist entity to put an end to its attacks and aggressions?
Well, what is happening is definitely a collective punishment against more than 2 million Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip with these measures which have been imposed by Israel on the Palestinians and with the complicity of the international community. We haven't heard any condemnation of the U.S. or Western Europe against Israel. Israel had been given a green light since the beginning of this Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. Israel has been given support and solidarity from the U.S., from Western Europe, and they are not paying attention to the suffering and the tragic situation that the Palestinian people have been experiencing for the past 9 days. I don't know what can be done to stop this, but there has to be an immediate pressure on Israel to at least have a ceasefire for a few hours, a few days, so the Palestinians are able to rescue those injured Palestinians, to be able to bury the dead bodies which are overflowing in hospitals and clinics here in Gaza. And unfortunately, the U.S. and Western Europe are not doing anything to help the Palestinians. We look forward to the Russians who have came with an initiative for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian resistance, but it will be seen. But as I'm talking to you right now, the situation is just
horrendous and horrible.
So devastating.
I understand clearly. So I was saying that the international community is applying a double standard policy because it stood up for the rights of the Ukrainians but neglected the rights of the Palestinians. Why is it that the international community disregard actually the Palestinian rights to safety and security?
Well, what happened at the beginning of the Hamas attack against Israel, many Israelis were killed during the attack on Israel on Sunday, October 7th, and Israel fabricated some of the images that came out during the attack on Israel, in which many Israeli civilians were killed, and also Israel fabricated a number of images to claim that Hamas beheaded babies and children, and that the Israeli civilians were the target of the attack, and that's why the international community, unfortunately, they bought the narrative of the Israeli government, and from the beginning, the international community gave its full support to Israel without any regard to Palestinian civilian suffering. And I believe that the international community started to wake up just in the past 2 days after the images coming out of Gaza, where thousands of Palestinians have been killed and buried under the rubble as a result of the Israeli bombardment on different areas of the Gaza Strip. But it seems to me that some mistakes happened on Saturday, October 7th, and those mistakes were fabricated even bigger by Israel, which brought more support to Israel from the international community.
So I said that Hamas is also waging a media campaign against the Israelis and disseminating videos and clips that say the truth about what is going on in Gaza. So I think that Israel finds it difficult to distort the truth and the reality.
Yes, it's a war of narrative between Hamas and the Israelis. As
absolutely.
I mentioned to you, the Israelis from the beginning were fabricating some images by Netanyahu and his government to claim that Hamas beheaded babies and children and attacked Israeli civilians intentionally. And as a result of that, Hamas came out with some videos which have been taken by cameras along the border between Gaza and Israel, and also have been taken by Hamas resistance fighters to basically refute the narrative of the Israeli government, the narrative of the Israeli army, and the narrative of the Israeli media. I think part of these images which have been played by Hamas to refute the Israeli narrative have been accepted by the international community.
Absolutely,
and that's why, as I mentioned to you, the situation has been changing for the past 2 days in terms of support for the Palestinians.
For the Palestinians, exactly. This is what I hinted to. So hospitals, unfortunately, are claiming that they are running short of beds, medicines, and medical equipment. So this is really bad and serious for the Palestinian people, especially the injured and the dead. So how can the neighboring countries or the international communities or Arab countries in general help in this regard?
Well, dear Muhammad, 2 hospitals have run out of service so far in the north of Gaza because of Israeli bombardment and also because of Israeli decision or orders to evacuate the areas where these hospitals, a hospital in the Beit Hanun area was shut off, and also another hospital in the Jabalia refugee camp was ordered by the Israeli.
And this is a crime in itself, so closing down hospitals when people desperately need them.
Yes, and the hospitals that are still running, some of these hospitals have faced bombing in the nearby areas. It's extremely difficult situation that already the Palestinian health system in Gaza is suffering from the 16 years of Israeli siege and blockade. And with the number of deaths and number of wounded Palestinians, the health infrastructure cannot absorb and deal with all of these number of injured Palestinians. And it's a situation that even the World Health Organization said that there is a collapse on the part of the health system here in Gaza because also of the tight closure and tight siege that have been imposed on Gaza for the past 9 days with no electricity, no fuel, no medical supplies. It's a very appalling situation here in the Gaza Strip.
It's a total blockade. So, Mr. Mekhimer, can you tell me how can you see the situation in the coming days? How will it evolve in the coming days?
Well, as I explained to you, the situation is already great here on the ground, and it seems to me that Israel is preparing the ground for a ground invasion, and when that happens, that will definitely lead to further
atrocities,
situation in terms of the deaths, in terms of the destruction, in terms of the humanitarian catastrophe that we are facing here in Gaza. It's just going to get worse, and we know it's going to get worse in the coming days and weeks.
So, no mediation attempts between...
No, I mean, I'm not even aware of any mediation. All I know that there has been calls by Egypt, by the Arab League, by the UN, asking Israel for a ceasefire, asking Israel for a humanitarian corridor. But Israel is not listening, and Israel is just
turning the deaf ear to all of this. Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, I understand. So, Mr. Mekhimer, thank you very much. So this brings us to the end of this. Yeah, I wish you all the best.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
استمعوا إلينا لنقل المعلومات من مصادرها الرسمية وتفسير حي للأحداث في حصص تحليلية مميزة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
Sintonizan Radio Argelia Internacional. El diario hablado.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos. La brutal agresión de las fuerzas sionistas continúa sobre Gaza por 9º día consecutivo. El balance de mártires palestinos asciende a más de 2.300 desde el inicio de la agresión. La Oficina de la ONU para Refugiados Palestinos, la UNRWA, advierte contra el desplazamiento masivo de más de 1 millón de personas en la Franja de Gaza y